Good morning, all.
Good morning, everybody. We'll start in just a moment. Trying a different internet connection today because we're all at home. We all need to use the internet at the same time. Just 1 second. Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope you are all keeping well. And with all the unpredictability and the changes around us, it is great to have these weekly moments of connection to eternal values. So let's start not at the beginning of Parshat Eikev, but at the end of Parshat Va'etchanan, the end of last week's Parsha, because as we sometimes need to remind ourselves, the Torah was not necessarily given to Moshe Rabbeinu, broken down into the weekly Parsha cycle, which we now have nowadays, but it was given in flowing form. And to really appreciate the meaning of the beginning of a Parsha, we need to be aware of that which takes place at the end of the week before. So in source number 1, at the end of last week's Parsha, we read, V'shamarta et ha-mitzvah, ואת החוקים ואת המשפטים אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לעשותם. You should keep the mitzvah and the statutes and the laws that I command you today to perform, to keep them. That was the end of last week's Parsha. And then we have the beginning of Parshat Eikev. And there we read, V'haya, and it shall be, Eikev tishma'un et hamishpatim ha'ele. Eikev, let's translate it for now as because or as a result of or as a consequence of, but we'll see a different meaning soon. When you listen to these mishpatim, u'shmartem v'asitem otam, and you will keep and perform them, then v'shamar Hashem Elokecha lecha et habrit ve'et hachesed asher nishbah lavotecha, Hashem your God will keep for you the covenant and the kindness which he swore to your forefathers. Now, the name of this week's Parsha is Eikev. And about the word Eikev, she comments in source number 3, V'hayayin shall be Eikev tishim ha'takalot she'adam dash. That's an aleph of a reference. Ve'akavav. If there are mitzvot which are mitzvot kalot, light mitzvot, or mitzvot which we don't take as seriously, she'adam dash ba'akevav, a person tramples on them with their heels, then tishma'un, you should still listen to them. And so the way Rashi explains the beginning of this week's Parsha is if there are mitzvot that people make fun of, mitzvot people don't take seriously, mitzvot people take lightly, mitzvot people trample on Eikev, nevertheless, tishma'un et ha-mishpatim ha'ele, still listen to these mishpatim and keep them, perform them. And the Kli Yakar now in source number 4 is going to try to understand, why did Rashi need to say this? Where did Rashi get this from? What was wrong with the literal understanding of the Pasuk that Rashi needed to take us in that direction? And Kli Yakar says here in source number 4, V'hayayin, it should be, Eikev t'unet mishpatim ha'ele. Pirish Rashi explained, as we saw, et ha-mitzvot im ha-mitzvot kalot she'bnei adam dashim be'akveihem. Tishma'un, these mitzvot which people take lightly and they trample on, you should listen to them. Now, lo ratzah lefaresh eikev zeh. Rashi did not want to explain this expression of eikev lashon from the terminology of eikev asher shama Avraham bekoli, because Avraham listened in my voice. Meaning, Rashi did not want to translate the word eikev literally here, meaning because. Why not? Lefi shekashelo, because Rashi had a difficulty. Halo b'pasuk hakodem ne'emar, in the preceding pasuk, which we saw in source number 1, and we'll see again in a moment, it says, Ushmartem et hachukim et hamishpatim, you should keep the chukim, the statutes, and the mishpatim. But then straight away we talk about mishpatim without chukim. let's look back at sources number 1 and 2. These are two psukim which flow into each other in the Torah. We just don't read them together because they come from different weeks. And in source number 1 it says, V'shamarta et hamitzvah v'et hachukim laws. Keep the statutes and the laws. And in the following pasuk it says, V'hayat, etc., then Hashem will keep his covenant with you. The chukim have been dropped. Source number 2, the opening pasuk of this week's parsha only references the mishpatim. It does not talk about the chukim, the statutes, which appear in the preceding pasuk. That is why Rashi isn't confident or comfortable taking the literal explanation of Akev, meaning when you keep the mishpatim, this is what will happen, because that means that the chukim are missing here. Something is missing. Ela vadai, rather, the Kli Yakar explains as follows in the second paragraph of source number 4. Certainly, Shelashon Akev kolel hachukim. It must be that the word Akev, the expression Akev, includes within it the chukim. Chukim are referenced in this term. V'ramzam balashon Akev. Why are the chukim called Akev? Literally meaning a heel. Lefi she'asatan v'ha'umot monin aleihen. Because the Satan and the other nations make fun of these mitzvot, they criticize these mitzvot. Mitzat she'ein ta'amam noda, because they don't have a known reason. And as a result of this, bnei adam noagin kalot bahem, v'dashim otam be'ekev. Why do people take these mitzvot lightly? And why do people trample on these mitzvot? They do so because we don't know the reason of them. So Akev itself, the word Akev, isn't just mitzvot that you happen to trample on. It's a reference to chukim, mitzvot which are trampled on because we don't know the reasoning for them. And that's why Rashi says in mitzvot kalot, if there are mitzvot which people take lightly, nevertheless you should keep them. Now, what should be more important to us? I think the answer is an easy answer. V'shnei chelkei mitzvot elu yushavim be'einecha lechol davar. These two forms of mitzvot, the mishpatim and the chukim, the ones which we would naturally identify with as ordinances which any society could have come up with on the one hand. And on the other hand, the statutes which we never would have imagined had they not appeared in the Torah, they should be equal in our eyes in every single way. Second. Ki, the same way that you're careful with the mitzvot that you identify with, you still need to identify with the mitzvot that you don't understand. And it's true the other way around. The benefit of mishpatim, the fact that we understand them, where we should apply that to the chukim as well. At the same time, there's a benefit of chukim, which we should also apply to mishpatim. What's the benefit of chukim? We will see that soon. But then he says, V'zesh amarnu. I missed it out to go straight to this point. When we said, Sh'amar lashot chukim lemishpatim hu lishnei panim, this relationship works both ways. Our chukim need to be like our mishpatim, and our mishpatim need to be like our chukim. And he explains it, and he says, Ha'echad number 1, who is as follows. Shekvar amarnu, we've already explained, ala zrizut, when it comes to alacrity or excitement to perform these mitzvot. Lomar is saying as follows. Kishem she'ata mazuraz ba'asiyat ha'mishpatim, the same way that you're excited and motivated to perform the mishpatim. Mitzad shebe'einecha taro'eh ha'to'elet, because with your very eyes you see the value, you understand why this makes sense, so obviously you'll keep the mishpatim. So too you should be careful with the chukim, which are referenced here, hinted at with the word akev. But it's the other way around as well. The same way that our performance of our mishpatim needs to inform our performance of the chukim, our performance of chukim needs to inform our performance of mishpatim, because the other way around. The same way that when it comes to chukim, with the reason of the chukim, when it comes to the chukim, you're definitely keeping the chukim l'shem shamayim. Why do you follow the mitzvot of shatnez? It's not because you identify with the reason. It's because Hashem said so. Why are we careful about meat and milk? It's because Hashem said so. Why are we concerned about para aduma? Because Hashem said so. I've been told that the sound is cutting out. I apologize about that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take, if that's the case, please give me 60 seconds and I will change location. And in 60 seconds time, we will recommence, hopefully with a stronger internet connection. If somebody with their screen on could just wave to the message, I'm going to take a 60-second break to change location. Can someone just, yes, raise your hand if you got that message? Great. So in 60 seconds time, I'll be back in a different location. Okay, thank you for your patience. I'm back now. Can you hear me? Yes. All right. So, thank you. Well, hopefully it'll be stronger now. What have you missed so far? The final pasuk of last week's Parsha references both Chukim and Mishpatim. This week's Parsha commences, V'haya ekev tishma'un, it shall be when you listen to the Mishpatim, just to the laws. And there's no reference to Chukim. That was source number 2. Rashi explains that the word ekev here, at the beginning of this week's Parsha, means the mitzvot which you don't take seriously. Now, why the ones which you trample on with your ekev, with your heel? Now, why would that be the case? The Kli Yakar explains that it's because the concept of chukim is missing from the end of last week's Parsha. Last week's Parsha concluded it should be when you keep the chukim and the mishpatim, it references both. And then in this week's Parsha it says, it should be when you keep the mishpatim, then Hashem will do his side of the covenant as well. But there's no reference to chukim. And so the Kli Yakar explains that the word ekev itself refers to chukim. Because why do we trample on certain mitzvot? We trample on them because we don't identify with them, we don't understand them. And those are the chukim. So the word ekev itself is a reference to the chukim. So in source number 1, we have the chukim and mishpatim. That's the final pasuk of last week's parsha. In source number 2, we have ekev, which is chukim, and we have mishpatim. That is why Rashi couldn't explain the word ekev literally. The Kli Yakar then went on to say that there are advantages of mishpatim and there are advantages of chukim. The advantage of mishpatim is that we identify with them. We have zrizut, we have alacrity, we are motivated and excited to perform those mitzvot because we know they're good for us and we know that they have a value for society. Those are the mishpatim. And the same way that we are excited to perform the mishpatim because we identify with them, so too we should perform the chukim, even though we don't know why we're doing them. But the other way around, there's also something for us to learn from the chukim. Because when you perform the chukim, you're obviously doing it l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. When you keep the mitzvot of shatnez, the mitzvah of para aduma, the mitzvot of kilayim, the mitzvah of meat and milk, when you do these, why do you do it? Lo l'shem ha'anatcha. It's not because of the benefit you derive from it. You don't feel any benefit at that time. You can't explain why it's valuable to you. Mishpatim, this should also be our approach to the mishpatim, the mitzvot which we do understand. Lo tekayem ba'avor hana'atcha. Even though you see the benefit of it, that's not why you should keep that mitzvah. Ki im ba'avur shemitzvat Hashem alecha, just keep it because that is what Hashem has commanded you. So why do we keep the mitzvot? It's really simple. Because Hashem said so. That is why we keep the mitzvot. And the things that we don't understand, we have to perform them with alacrity and motivation and excitement as if we understood them. And the things that we do understand, even though we understand them, beneficial, even though we can identify with them, nevertheless, we do them because Hashem said so and for no other reason. That is why we keep the mitzvot. Now, we're now going to move on to a classic commentary of the Kli Yakar, a different classic point of the Kli Yakar. I have one more trick up my sleeve for my internet connection, by the way. So if there is a challenge, please let me know, and I will try one more thing if we have further disruption. We move on to source number 5. And let's read this pasuk very carefully. Kol ha-mitzvah asher anochi mitzavcha hayom. The entire mitzvah that I command you today, tishmarun la'asot, you should keep to perform. Why? Lema'an, and you will multiply. Uvatem, and you shall come. Virishtem et haaretz, and you will inherit the land. Asher nishba Hashem la'avotechem, that Hashem has sworn to your forefathers. And in this pasuk, if you look at the grammar of this pasuk, numerous questions arise, as pointed out by the Kli Yakar in source number 6 at the bottom of page 1, and he says, "Hitchil b'lashon yachid, v'siyem b'lashon rabim." Who is this pasuk addressing? It starts off by addressing the individual. Kol ha-mitzvah she'anochi mitzavcha hayom. It's not mitzaveh etchem, it's mitzavcha, the mitzvah that I command you individually. It's you in the singular. But then it switches and it says tishmarun, plural. You plural should keep, and you plural should live, and you plural will multiply and come in plural and inherit in plural. The pasuk starts off addressing the individual, but then it moves into the plural. What's going on here in this pasuk? The other thing we're going to reflect on is that this pasuk talks about the mitzvah in the singular. It doesn't say kol ha-mitzvot, all of the commandments plural, but kol ha-mitzvah singular. And the Kli Yakar is going to teach us some powerful things based on this grammar over here at the top of page 2. Why is this? Because when it comes to one of the great tzaddikim who keep the world going, va'afilu yachid, and even if you're not the greatest tzaddik ever, any private individual, she'asa mitzvah achat, who performs just one mitzvah, then ashrei lo, happy are they, shehechriya et atzmo ve'et kol ha'olam l'chaf zchut. Then you are able to tip the entire world to be righteous. This is based on the Gemara, which teaches us that a person should always view themselves with a perfect balance between zut and chovah, merit and debt, let's call it, the bad things, okay? And you always have to view yourself and the whole world as being in perfect equilibrium. And all you need to do is perform just one mitzvah. Then you've tipped your personal status to being a righteous individual. And not only your personal status, the entire world now has a majority of merit. When you approach a particular mitzvah, we shouldn't think to ourselves, oh, it's just one mitzvah, what difference does it make? This is the one mitzvah which can tip the balance and can make the world a place of benefit over all. Now, he goes on to say, that's why it says, Asher anochi mitzavacha liyachid. It commands the individual. And the pasuk starts off by addressing the individual, saying, as an individual, we should know, tishmarun la'asot laman tichyun, the impact it has on the public and the plural and the community. If one person does it, it's as if many people have done it, and the benefit will arrive to everybody. So Hashem starts off by addressing the individual, And then he moves on to the community, because we have to understand that our individual actions can impact the community and the nation and the world as a whole. And we're going to see this again in the Kli Yakar next week on Parshat Re'eh, because next week it says Re'eh, see, not Re'u, plural. Re'eh, see in the singular. Re'eh, each person should see. Anochi noten lifneichem hayom bracha uklala. I put before you, plural today, blessing and curse. We each individual need to know that the blessing and the curse of the plural depends on our individual actions. Now, how many mitzvot does it take to change the world, to change an individual, to tip the balance? Just one mitzvah. And therefore, v'nakat ha-mitzvah b'lashon yachid. That's why the Torah refers to the mitzvah in the singular. If you keep the mitzvah as an individual, then there'll be benefit for everybody. If you just keep one mitzvah properly, that can have the impact that everybody would live as a result. And we're going to see this again in the Kli Yakar next week. Let's move on to something else this week. In source number 7, let's remind ourselves, Moshe Rabbeinu is a few weeks before passing away, and he recalls the trials and tribulations and the highs and lows of our times in the wilderness, and he wants us to keep those memories alive for the future. And he says, you should remember this whole journey that Hashem your God took you through the wilderness for these 40 years. Now, why did Hashem do this? Leman anotcha, inui means suffering. So it suggests that it was supposed to be difficult for us. Lenasotcha, in order to test us. Ladat, in order to know what was the point of this test. What do you get out? What's the result of this test? It's to know. Et asher bilvavcha hatishmor mitzvotav imlo, whether in our hearts we're going to keep Hashem's mitzvot or not. Why did we spend 40 years in the Midbar? One answer is because we sinned with Chet HaMeraglim, and it was a punishment, and it was a consequence. And there's another answer, which doesn't contradict that answer, which is that we spent 40 years in the Midbar as a test. And the aim of the test is to show if deep down in our hearts, we're really into the concept of keeping Hashem's mitzvot. And the Kli Yakar is going to develop the concept of this test in source number 8. Etc. When it talks about lenasotcha, to test you, he says, hu lashon haramat nes. That is an expression of lifting up a banner. The word nes, miracle, which is also the root of nisayon, a test, a trial, also literally means a banner, a big flag. Why? Well, a miracle is a flag, because a miracle flags is a major sign of Hashem's providence and involvement in the world. That's why a miracle is a nes. It's a huge banner. It's an announcement to the world. A test, similarly, explains the Kli Yakar, is a public show and a public announcement. Milashon, like it says, Nisa aleinu et or panecha Hashem in Tehillim, the light of Hashem's countenance should raise. So it means to lift up like a banner. It's as if our hearts are being put up in public and placed at the entrance within people's eye view, but that everyone can see. Hashem wanted everyone in the world to see the results of this test. So, why did we spend 40 years in the Midbar? In order to test us, but not just as a test where you receive your result via email and only you know what you got and nobody else knows how you did in the test. No, the aim of this test as a nes is a public display of whether we're going to follow Hashem or not. And either way we're going to perform in this test, it's going to make an announcement. Because he says, and he wants us to know, whether we pass the test or not, it's going to be a very big public announcement. Why? Because, just going to mute once more. Everybody is muted again. Because Mima nafshach. Either way you look at it. Im tishmor mitzvotav. If we pass the test and we keep Hashem's mitzvot, then v'yiten Hashem lacha atzlacha b'yeter se'et al kol ha'amim. Hashem will make you incredibly successful, more successful than other nations. Then yelahem makom lalun v'lomar. The other nations will complain and they'll say, Lama lo asachen lechol goy Yishmael ve'esav yotzei yerech Abraham. What about the other descendants of Abraham Avinu? What about the family of Ishmael? What about the family of Esav? Why are the families of Yitzchak and Yaakov receiving all of these blessings? Well, there's an answer to that question. Yashiv lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem can respond to them. Ki mi goy asher ya'amod b'nisayon kamohem. Which other nation has stood the trial and tribulations like they have? Ki alchu acharei Hashem be'eretz lo zruah, because they followed Hashem in this unsown land, meaning our success in the Midbar is proof of our love of Hashem and the reason why we are deserving of His extra blessing. So that's if we do well. If we pass the test, it's a public announcement that we deserve Hashem's blessing. V'chein lehefech, but the other way around is also true. Im chas v'shalom yu chotim. If chas v'shalom we sin. V'shlach Hashem bahem et ha'ma'ara, and Hashem curses us instead of blessing us. Then yomru chol hagoyim, everyone's going to ask, Al ma asa Hashem kacha le'aretz hazot. Why is Hashem punishing Israel in this way? Why is He picking on Israel? V'yashiv lahem, the answer is, Lefi shelo hayu shleimim im Hashem, because they didn't behave properly with Hashem. V'zeu shene'emar lanasotcha. That is why it is a very public test. If we pass the test, it is obvious for everybody to see that we passed the test because of Hashem's blessings, like a big banner flying saying this people loves Hashem. If we fail the test and we receive Hashem's punishment and curses, then unfortunately that's also going to be obvious for everybody to see, like a big banner saying this is a nation which didn't listen to Hashem. So the concept of a nisayon, a test, isn't just about the private level of success, it is a public announcement. We're going to move on to some famous words in this week's Parsha. Now in source number 9, we're going to ask a classic question, give a classic answer, then we're going to ask the classic follow-on question, and then we're going to say something different. So if you're very familiar with these concepts, bear with us until we reach the novel part of the Kli Yakar, and there's obviously benefit in revision anyway. Because our Parsha now goes on to ask a simple question. At the end of the day, when all is said and done, what does Hashem want from us? What are we supposed to do with our lives in this world? And our Parsha tells us the explicit answer to that question. V'ata Yisrael, now Israel. Ma Hashem sho'el. Ma Hashem Elokecha sho'el mi'imach. What does Hashem, your God, ask of you? Ki im, all He wants is just Liyirat Hashem Elokecha, to fear Hashem your God. Lalechet b'chol drachav, to go in all of His ways. U'la'avah oto, and to love Him. V'la'avod et Hashem Elokecha, and to worship Hashem your God b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha, with all your heart and all your soul. Lishmor et mitzvot Hashem ve'et chukotav asher anochi mitzavcha hayom letov lach, to keep Hashem's mitzvot and His chukim that I'm commanding you today to be good for you. And the classic question, about these psukim is about these little words. Ki im, just. The question is asked, what does Hashem want of you? And we're told, it's not much, just. It's just. And what comes after the words just? All Hashem wants for us is only to fear Him, to go in all of His ways, to love Him, to serve Him with all of our hearts and all of our souls, to keep all of His mitzvot and His chukim. That's quite the shopping list. It's like David HaMelech. The Midrash actually makes this connection. We're soon going to come to the month of Elul, and we're going to say LeDavid Hashem Ori from Tehillim. And there David HaMelech says to Hashem, Achat sha'alti me'et Hashem, Hashem, can I just have one thing? Ota avakesh, that's all I'm asking for. And then David HaMelech says, Shifti b'veit Hashem kol yemei chayai, I want to live in your house all the time. Lachzot b'nam Hashem, I want to see you. Levaker b'eichalo, I want to visit your heichal. Ki yitzbeneni b'sukkah, I want you to protect me in your sukkah. I want you to look after me on a bad day. I want you to lift me up on a mountain. I want you to give me power over my enemies. David HaMelech says, can I have just one thing? And then he gives a whole shopping list. And there's a midrash which actually says that Hashem says to David HaMelech, what's going on? You ask for just one thing, And then you give a whole shopping list. And David HaMelech says, you started it. Because in the Torah, in Parshat Eikev, you said, what do I want of you? All I want is, and you said, you have to love me, fear me, all your heart, all your soul. So what does this mean here, ki'im? Suggesting that it's not such a big deal whether Hashem wants all these things from us. Hashem just wants us to do these things. That's the classic question, which the Kli Yakar quotes in source number 10. V'ata Yisrael, and now Israel, ma Hashem Elokecha sho'im imach ki'im, just li'yirah to fear him. Chazal Amru, and our sages asked in the Gemara in Brachot, page 33b, V'chi hayirah milta zutratihi. Is the fear of Hashem such a small thing? Just fear Hashem, not a big deal. Is that such a small thing? And the Gemara answers, and I don't like this answer of the Gemara. It doesn't mean that I disagree with the Gemara, chas v'shalom. I just don't like it. And the answer of the Gemara is it's true, legabei Moshe zutratihi. For Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not a big deal. Meaning, when Hashem addresses Moshe, and he says it's not a big deal, what he means is, Moshe, for you, this isn't a big deal. But the reality is that for the rest of us, it is a big deal, and it's not so simple. And now we have the classic follow-up question. Umakshim kan, top of page 3. So then we go on and ask, V'chi ba'avur zeh amar l'chol Yisrael, ma Hashem sho'el mi'imach? Wait a second. If Hashem is only addressing Moshe Rabbeinu, if this is a private conversation between the two of them, then why is the whole of Am Yisrael told, what does Hashem want from you? You see, the reason why I don't like the answer of the Gemara is that it seems to limit this whole demand to just one person, meaning it's not really for the rest of us. But it's clearly the case that the Torah is addressing all of us, because it's what we're supposed to, because it is addressed to the whole of Am Yisrael. And therefore, some people answer, V'yesh metartzim, we have to read the Gemara carefully. Legabei Moshe. When the Gemara says, Legabei Moshe, concerning Moshe, what does that mean? Hainu, it means, Kishahayu Yisrael Eitzel Moshe. When the Jews were with Moshe. Shaya Madricha b'midat hayira, and when Moshe led them and guided us to develop our sense of yira of Hashem as a zutratihi, then it is a small deal. So if we look back at the bottom of page 2, just the Kli Yakar there quoting the Gemara, when it says yes, legabei Moshe zutratihi, legabei doesn't necessarily mean concerning Moshe, it's a small deal, but legabei means when we were together with Moshe, it was a small deal. Meaning, when Moshe was our leader, this wasn't such a big deal. But for future generations, it will be a big deal. Now, at least he's expanded this as addressing one individual to addressing an entire nation. But what it does suggest is that for the rest of us, it is actually more challenging than it appears to do everything on this list. Now, the Kli Yakar wants to now expand this and explain this. V'ani omer, I want to explain as follows. Shezeu chavanat hapasuk, because this isn't just a question and answer in the Gemara. This is what the Torah meant, Sha'amar, when it says ve'ata, and now Israel. Mahu ve'ata. The beginning of the shopping list is we're told, and now Israel, what does Hashem ask of you? Why now? What is ve'ata? But because in a few psukim later in the Parsha, it's going to reference and say, you should know today, ki lo et b'neichem asher lo yad'u v'lo ra'u et musar Hashem Elokeichem. There are things that you should know with your children and grandchildren who haven't seen what you've seen and haven't heard what you heard. It's not going to come naturally to future generations. That's what it's going to say in a few psukim time in the Torah. It's going to reference the fact that we in the Midbar are in a privileged place and time in order to understand that which took place, something which our children and grandchildren are not going to find as easy. V'chol hasipur, and everything that the Torah tells us in the continuation of the Parsha, ad einechem haraot, until the word that our very own eyes have seen, et kol maseh Hashem, or the actions of Hashem. Kach biuro. This is what's going on here. Ilu bakashti hayira min b'neichem, asher yakum achreichem, asher lo ra'u kol hanoraot asher asa Hashem. If I would demand from your children, who will arise after you, to fear me, These are people who haven't seen all the awesome things that Hashem has done. Leman tiyeh yirato al pneihem, these amazing things which enable fear of Hashem. As vadai haiti shoel davar gadol, then it really is a big deal. Ki vadai kasher lachnis et ha'adam ba'ol hayira, it is very difficult to bring somebody to the fear of Shamayim under the yoke of the awe of heaven. Ki rav hu, it really is a big deal. And so when the Torah says, what do I want of you? I only want these things. For Moshe, it was only those things. For the people legabei Moshe who were there with Moshe, it wasn't a big deal. But for us in our times and for future generations, it is a big deal. Now, on the one hand, what we lose here is the eternal message of the words of these pasuk, because it's suggesting that some of the words of the pasuk don't apply to us. The words ki'im only apply to that generation. The benefit of this explanation is that if there are any of us who struggle with Yirat Shamayim, where we feel that it doesn't come so easily to actually fear a sense of awe of Shamayim and everything that's encompassed in the concept of Yirat Shamayim, it almost helps us, because what the Kli Yakar is saying is that it really is a big deal and it's not so simple. And we shouldn't feel guilty if it's something that we struggle with, because it genuinely is a struggle. If you lived in the Midbar and you ate man and you drank from Miriam's well, and you were only one generation away from Yetziat Mitzrayim, the fear of Hashem isn't such a big deal. But for us in future generations, it is a big deal. And that's why it says in the Parsha, V'omnam va'ata, and now at this particular point in time, Ratzal Omar, what it's telling us is, Hadar hazeh atem ra'u, your generation have seen certain things. Ki be'enechem re'item kol hanarot asher asah Elokim. Your very own eyes have seen all these awesome things that Hashem has done. So that you would have an awe of Hashem. You yourselves are used to this midah, this quality of fear. Therefore, and now, particularly now, ba'asher husham, at that very point in time, a stylistic quotation from Breshit, Hashem shoel me'imach, from you guys, it's a small deal. Moshe, the Gemara says, legabei Moshe, for the people together with Moshe, meaning for Moshe's generation, for Moshe's chevra, it wasn't such a big deal. Zedar Hamidbar, that's a generation of the wilderness, Shahayu Bizman Moshe, who were there at the time of Moshe, Lahem Vadai Milta Zutratehi, for them, the fear of Hashem, Hayira, is actually not such a big deal. To give a modern parallel explanation of this, if we consider ourselves as being the final generation of people who will ever meet Shoah survivors, our children and grandchildren will never meet a survivor. So our ability to identify with the Shoah and that which took place in the Shoah is far, far greater, because there are people in our generation or just one generation ago who saw with their own eyes what the Shoah means and what it means for us as a nation and for humanity and for the world. However, where it is a milta zutrati, a small deal for our generation, where I know I'm perhaps in a different generation than some of you, but for our time, it is a small deal to appreciate that which took place in the Shoah. In future generations, it's going to be a very, very big challenge, because with the passage of time, it becomes harder to identify with these things. And maybe what Hashem is telling that generation is, for you, it's a small deal, but when you educate your children and grandchildren, you have to understand that the things that come naturally to you are not necessarily going to come naturally to them. And in this parasha, where we have an entire paragraph of Hashem stressing to us what our very own eyes have seen, maybe he's not just expressing to us the great privilege of that generation of the Midbar and the closeness they felt with Hashem. Maybe he's also explaining to them that don't think that for your children or grandchildren it's going to be so easy. They will be living in a different world, and therefore when we consider their education and the messages we deliver to them, we have to understand that the things which are obvious to us are not going to be obvious to our children or our grandchildren. We will now move on to another famous section of Parshat Eikev, which is the second paragraph of the Shema. And right at the end of that, we see in source number 11, the bracha that if we keep everything that's written in the second paragraph of the Shema, then the good news will be, Lama'an, in order that Yirbu yemechem v'imei b'neichem, the days of your children, your days and the days of your children shall increase. Al ha'adama, on the land, asher nishba Hashem la'avotechem, that Hashem has sworn to your forefathers, latet lahem, to give to them, kimei hashamayim ala haaretz, like the days of heaven on earth. The words of the second paragraph of the Shema, those concluding words. Now, if we pay attention to these words, which we say fairly often, where will we receive the bracha of longevity? We will have length of days for us and our children. Al ha'adama, on the land that Hashem promised to us. It appears that this is a bracha for life expectancy in the land of Israel. And therefore, in source number 12, in the Gemara of Brachot, Rabbi Yochanan was in for a surprise. Because Amru Leila Rabbi Yochanan, they told Rabbi Yochanan, Ikasavi Bavel. Do you know that in Bavel there are some very old individuals? Rabbi Yochanan says, how could that be? Outside Israel, people are having length of days. Tama, he was astounded. Bamar, he says, what do you mean? Leman yirbu yimechem v'imei b'nechem al ha'adama ketiv. The Torah tells us that this reference applies to the land. What does that suggest? It suggests about b'chutz la'aretz lo. This bracha doesn't apply in chutz la'aretz. He didn't understand how people could be living so long outside Israel. But then they explained to him, who are these people who are living a long life? Makdimi umachashchi levei knishta. Here you have people who get up early to go to shul and stay late in shul. Amai says, hainu da'ahani lahu. That is why they're getting a long life. Kada'amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi lebnei, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi told his kids, Kadimu v'chashichu v'aylu lebei knishta, make sure you get up early, even in the dark, and stay there when it's dark, and go to shul, ki heichet the chayi, so that you will have a longer life. So the story is, the Torah says there will be a reward in the land of Israel. Rabbi Yochanan is surprised. How can people outside the land of Israel receive this reward? He's told they spend a lot of time in shul. He says, now I understand. That's why they get the reward. In source number 13, the Kli Yakar feels that this Gemara requires a little bit more explanation. And he's going to tell us as follows. Lama'an yirbu v'neichem, yemechem v'mei b'neichem al hadama. He starts off by quoting this Gemara. B'masechet brachot, amru leRabbi Yochanan nikasabi b'Bavel, tama v'akti v'mechem v'mei b'neichem al hadama, etc. Second paragraph of source 13. He's now going to ask a question about this Gemara. V'kasha al teirutz zeh, asks the Kli Yakar. I want to ask a question against this explanation. Ki adayin hakushya bimkomar omedet. Rabbi Yochanan's original question still applies. Shaharei b'pasuk zeh, in the pasuk in the Torah, in the final paragraph of this final pasuk of the second paragraph of the Shema, Amar Stam, all it says is al ha'adama, on the land. Bilti shum chaluka, without any further differentiation. Umehechan lamad lomar shepasuk zeh medaber davka bizman she'ein hochim lebeit hakneset, lomar she'az davka memuat. Where in the Torah does it suggest that there's an extra qualification here? That if you go to shul, then even if you're outside Israel, then you'll receive this bracha. But if you're in Israel, even if you don't go to shul, you receive that bracha. That's not what the Torah says. The Torah just says you will receive this bracha in the land. So how does the concept that they go to shul early and late in any way impact this understanding? V'nir Aleph Aresh, the Kli Yakar explains as follows. Al derech she'amru Chazal, based on another Gemara, the Gemara in Megillah, page 29a. She'atidin batei knisiyot u'batei mitrashot she'bechutz ha'aretz shikv'u be'eretz Yisrael. This is an amazing fundraising Gemara. It says that ultimately the shuls and the batei midrash of chutz la'aretz will be uprooted and they'll be transported to the land of Israel. If anyone ever feels guilty, why should I make a donation to a building project of a Beit Midrash in Chutz La'aretz? Why am I building up diaspora Jewry when we all belong in Israel? And when ultimately we'll all be in Israel? The answer is this is a long-term investment because the entire Mizrahi campus is going to be lifted up and transported to Eretz Yisrael. So your investment, you're actually donating to Israel if you donate to a shul in Chutz La'aretz. It's a great fundraising Gemara. So what's the point of Imkain? Therefore, ha'adama shebechol batei knisiyot shel Chutz La'aretz, zohi ha'adama shel Eretz Yisrael. The land of the shuls of Chutz La'aretz is the land of Eretz Yisrael. You're standing in that territory. It's almost as if every single shul and Beit Midrash in the world is an Israeli embassy. You're standing within the domain of Eretz Yisrael. Why? Shaharei La'atid, because in the future, Yikva Hashem Batei Knisiyot Habinyan V'Hakarka, the building, and now the Kli Yakar is throwing in the land as well. So it's not just the building, but the land that's supporting the building will be fixed. Mikol V'Kol El Eretz Yisrael, entirely moved to Israel. What does that mean? V'imkain, therefore, Vadai Adamai Admat Kodeshi, that land, therefore, is hallowed turf. V'cheilek min admat Eretz Yisrael, and it's part of the land of Israel, and as a result, Hamashkim v'Hamarif b'chol yom lebatei knisiyot. Someone who gets up early to go to shul and stays there late, domeh ki'ilu b'chol yom hu omed al adama shenishba Hashem lavotam. It's as if every single day you're standing inside Eretz Yisrael. Umekuyam bo yi'ud, and therefore he receives the reward of that final pasuk of the second paragraph of the Shema applies in Israel, not just in the biblical borders of the land of Israel, but also inside all the Israeli embassies around the world, meaning the shuls and the Batei Midrash. And that's why when Rabbi Yochanan heard that these people were going to shul, he says, now it all makes sense. Because visiting shul is like visiting Israel. And the Kli Yakar goes on to explain that we can now understand other things as well. Lachem lo ne'emar ela lahem. You see in the final pasuk of the final paragraph of the second paragraph of the Shema, it doesn't say that Hashem promised to give lachem to you. It says Hashem promised to give lahem to them. Who is them? Pirush Rashi explains, Mikan letchiyat hametim min haTorah. This is a biblical source for tchiyat hametim, the resurrection of those who have passed away, because the reference isn't lachem directly to us, the reference is actually lahem to others. Now this helps answer a useful question, which is that if you were to do the statistics and look for scientific evidence that spending more time in shul increases your lifespan, and that living in Israel increases your lifespan, you're not always going to find an immediate causative relationship or correlation. And some of you might be thinking, well, we're learning this. I know people who are very old and they've never been to shul. And I know people who go to shul 3 times a day and unfortunately didn't live to a ripe old age. So if we understand that this pasuk, when it talks about the length of days, isn't talking about this world, it's talking about the next world and length of days in the next world, it makes a lot more sense. And the Kli Yakar says that that's inferred by the word lahem. It's referring to them, not directly to us. But he wants to understand this at least in context. What's it doing here? Because when is it that all the shuls are going to move to Israel and make aliyah? It is at the time of Tchiyat HaMeitim when the shuls are also going to move. Maybe we have a circular plot, and it goes back to the beginning of that section where it talks about serving Hashem with our hearts. What is the worship of the heart? Zot tefillah, that's prayer, as Rashi explains. And therefore, if we engage in the worship of the heart, Shema mina, what do we learn from here? The whole context here is lots of people coming together to daven in shul. And for that we have the designated reward of length of days on the land. Now, what's significant here, the Kli Yakar is going to say, is that in the story of Rabbi Yochanan in the Gemara, it doesn't talk about spending lots of time in shul, but it's specifically if you come to shul early or you stay at shul late. And if any of our words this morning have deflated anybody by saying, oh, we can't go to shul, and who knows when we can next go to shul, and we're missing out on this opportunity, then the next words of the Kli Yakar can actually be a source of chizuk for those of us who are unable to go to shul. If you have 10 males at home over the age of bar mitzvah, then fantastic. But for the rest of us, we're unable to do this. And he says, why does it specifically reference those who come early and those who stay late? Timsa muvu'ar yafeh, it's nicely explained. B'chiburenu, he's using the royal we in our book, Ololot Ephraim, in a certain place, and have a look there. The Shichnot Tidushu Uvata Shama, have a look there, and it'll all be explained nicely. So that's what we're going to do. We're now closing the Kli Yakar, and we're opening up source number 14, which is by the same author, a book called Ololot Ephraim. I think we did this last week as well. And let's see how he explains this concept. And he says in source number 14, what is the significance of getting up early for shul or staying behind late in shul? If you're the first one in shul, there's no one else there. It is just you and Hashem. You are serving Hashem in solitude when you're in shul by yourself, because it's only you and Hashem. And therefore you're much closer to the source of life. You see, coming to shul helps you because you're coming close to the source of life. The closer you come, the more life source you draw for yourself. Why did Rabbi Yochanan think that there are only elderly people in Israel? Because in Israel, you're close to the source of life, and therefore you yourself take on some life energy. But the point is that if you're in shul early, then you're closer to Hashem, because it's only you and Hashem, and there's no one else there to interfere. And therefore you yourself are also closer to the source of life. Afterwards he saw, the ones who come early to shul and stay late in shul, Zochin gam b'chutz la'aretz, outside Israel as well, you can merit this reward. Because those people cleave to Hashem and are even closer to Hashem. And I know that literally speaking, it's talking about being by yourself with Hashem in shul, either at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. But I think as well there can be a benefit of the relationship with Hashem when it is just you and Hashem and there's no one else there. It's just you and Hashem. No other distraction, no other people. It is very much about your personal relationship with Hashem. Now, as a general rule and as a public policy, and in normal times, this isn't the way to go. Certainly for men where they have a chiyuv to daven as part of a minyan, we don't have really the luxury or the option of saying, I feel like I can connect to Hashem better at home today because we need to daven with a minyan. But for women who have the option of davening at home always, and for all of us where we don't have the option and we're all forced to daven at home at the moment, there is a benefit in the one-on-one relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which enables you to come close to the source of light. And if you're able to do that in a holy place like in a shul, then you're certainly coming closer to Eretz Yisrael as well. I'd like to look at just one more thing today. It's another exclusion word in this week's Parsha. We've already seen ki'im, just or only. Now we're going to look at the word rak. Source number 15. We're told, Hashem, your God, has the heavens and the upper heavens, the land, and everything in the world. Absolutely everything belongs to Hashem. Rak ba'avotecha chashak Hashem. Rak, however, only Hashem desired your fathers, lava otam, to love them, vayivchar b'zaram achrayhem, and He chose their offspring after them, b'chem mikol hamim kayom anzeh, of you guys from all the nations, like this day. And the Kli Yakar will want to understand this word rak. What does it mean that Hashem only chose your forefathers? Who does that come to exclude? Or what does that come to exclude? Source number 16. Hey Hashem Elokecha Shamayim, etc. Rak ba'avotecha chashak Hashem. B'milat rak, here the word rak, ba lema'et hashamayim v'shmei hashamayim. It comes to exclude the heavens and the upper heavens. Shebekulam lo chashak Hashem ki im ba'avotecha. That's not what Hashem desired. What He really desired was your forefathers. Kedat chochmei ha'emet, like the philosophers or the Kabbalists, she'amruhu said, Gdolim tzadikim b'maseh hashamayim. Tzadikim, the righteous, are greater than what Hashem has up there in heaven, va'aretz. They're greater than the creation of Shemayim and Aretz. V'yisgimu lomar, and they agree to say, Shekulam nivru ba'avur hadam, it is all about humankind. Meaning, let's look at this in source 15 to explain. We have this pasuk. Hein laHashem elokecha hashamayim, u'shmei hashamayim ha'aretz v'chol asher ba. Hashem has the heavens and the upper heavens and earth. Hashem has all of creation. But Hashem didn't choose creation. Rak ba'avotecha chashak Hashem. Hashem chose your forefathers and their offspring. Hashem chose you. So the word rak comes to exclude heaven and earth, everything which Hashem created, because the whole point of creation is mankind. We are at the top of the pyramid. It is all about us. And that's what rak comes to explain. We shouldn't worry that Hashem has this upper world of spiritual and celestial beings which take priority over us. Hashem did it all for us. Now that makes sense according to certain people. Lo chadat Rambam, however, that doesn't work according to Rambam. Shekatav, she'adam ikar b'tachtonim. Rambam wrote that mankind is the most important thing down here. Aval ein lo erech im elyonim. Rambam felt that the upper worlds are far greater than us, and we can't be compared to them. So therefore we have to explain this word rak according to Rambam. U'lisfarat Rambam yesh makom lefaresh pasuk zeh. We'll have to explain according to Rambam as follows. Shekol hasipunim shach lemashen emar. This concept of Hashem choosing our forefathers is not a response to the fact from the previous pasuk that Hashem has the heavens. It's an introduction to the continuation of the Parsha, where we reach the pinnacle of va'ahavtem et hager, etc. We should love the ger. Why? Ki chafetz Hashem titidbeku begerim. Hashem wanted us to cleave to gerim. Afal pi shehem nemuchim, even though in terms of social status they are vulnerable and they could be lowly. Mikol makom imenu yitbarach tiru v'chein ta'asu. Learn from Hashem. Ki hein laHashem elokech hashamayim v'shmei hashamayim. Look what Hashem has. He has all the heavens there to serve him. V'im godol romamoto yitbarach, but together with his great upper lofty greatness, mikol makom. Rak ba'avotecha chashak Hashem. Hashem chose your forefathers. Im heyotam nemuchim be'erech elyonim hakrovim el Hashem, notwithstanding their relative lack of value compared to everything Hashem has in heaven. Hashem is saying, I've got all the angels, I've got all the heavens, I've got everything that's going on out there. I've got the entire universe to serve me, but I chose you guys. Don't think that you should look down on people below you or who you perceive to be below you. You should love the ger. V'od natan mofet sheni, and he goes on to say, Ki Hashem elokechem elokei elokim. The psukim then continue to say, Hashem is the God of all of the gods. Look how powerful he is. V'afal pichen, nevertheless, oseh mishpat yatom v'almana v'ohev ger. Hashem looks out for the vulnerable. He looks out for the orphan. He looks out for the widow. He loves the convert. Those are the people Hashem looks out for. Don't think that you are too special, that you are too powerful to care for the vulnerable. And from here, Rabbi Yochanan taught, Kol makom she'ata motzeh gedulato shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sham ata motzeh in v'tanuto. Wherever you find Hashem's greatness, you also find his humility, because notwithstanding his exceptional greatness, he cares about the little things, and he cares about the vulnerable individuals, and we should learn from Hashem as well that it's not below us to care for those who are vulnerable. And from these two introductions, that Hashem has heaven and earth, and Hashem is the God of all the gods with small g's, that is all a build-up to and a background to the mitzvah of va'ahavtem et hager. We should love the ger, we should look after the vulnerable, and we should not look down on anybody ourselves. That's it for the Kli Yakar for today. I apologize for the connectivity issues at the beginning, and hopefully next week, or even by tomorrow, for those who join us tomorrow, I'll work it all out, and we shouldn't have any problems. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I did.
By holding on the space.
I did.
Okay. Costco had lines in the checkout running